I will be speaking, unfortunately, in English, not in Swedish, because I'm one of those very common Finnish people who have studied many years of Swedish, but I'm not really fluent in speaking in Swedish, so I will be speaking in English. And I will be telling you something about the fur farming situation in Finland, and I will do some comparisons with Sweden, because you probably all know that fur farming is very Scandinavian industry, very focused on Nordic countries, and we have lots of these common issues in these countries. About my background, I have been involved in animal protection and doing things against fur farming for many years. I have also worked in the parliament for more than 5 years and as an assistant of an MP. And I'm also a sociologist, and I'm doing my PhD thesis about human-animal issues also. The name of this presentation refers to the fact that we have this quite contradictory situation in Nordic countries, that we have really rich welfare states, and despite that we have one of the largest fur farming sectors in Europe and in the Western world. And for example, in Finland, where fur farming is still an even stronger industry than in Sweden, when we discuss the probable ban of fur farming or things like that, it's the economy is like the most common answer that you get when you try to discuss the problems of the fur farming and the possible ban. So in Finland we have this general idea that we need to have fur farming going on, as it brings so much foreign money to our country. So I'm not an expert on the Swedish fur farming, but I will make some comparisons to give you some kind of idea what's the difference and what are the common things between Swedish and Finnish fur farming. So you probably all know that in Sweden there are not any more fox farms in this country. It has been made practically impossible by making strict legislation, but there is a little bit more than 1 million minks skinned annually, about 60 mink farms left in Sweden, and then I have understood that there is one chinchilla farm in Sweden. But in Finland there are no real restrictions about the species to be farmed, so almost anything can be still farmed in Finland, and that's really taken advantage of. So we farm even more minks than you do in Sweden. About 1.7 million minks annually are skinned in Finnish fur farms, and even more foxes, about 1.8 million foxes. And then we have this Finnish specialty. We farm also raccoon dogs. There are only mainly Poland and Finland that still farm raccoon dogs in Europe. And then we farm ferrets or polecats and also some sables. They are only farmed in one farm in Finland at the moment. We used to have also rabbits and chinchillas, like you do in Sweden, but not at the moment. But it's not forbidden to have those animals. In Sweden, if you would farm foxes, the foxes should have possibility to dig, to exercise, to move around. But in Finland, it's still possible to farm foxes in traditional wire mesh cages. And the most problematic species is raccoon dog, because there is practically no legislation at all in Finland regarding raccoon dogs. So in practice, farmers just follow the legislation made for foxes when they farm raccoon dogs. So there are no specific regulations for raccoon dogs at all. And then there is another specialty regarding raccoon dogs, that even though also the other fur farm animals are not really domesticated animals. They have been only farmed for a little bit more than 100 years. Raccoon dogs have only been farmed for about 40 years. Raccoon dog was not a real native species to Finland, and the first raccoon dogs appeared in Finland in 1970s. They came from the Russian side of the border, where raccoon dogs have also been farmed. And at first, Finnish fur farmers didn't even know what kind of species this is which they found from the woods. And then they just found out the species name and they started farming that species in the 1970s. So it's really not a domesticated species at all. And these must be the species that you are most familiar with, that are most common internationally, minks and foxes. And in general, you have the same welfare problems with most of the animals that are farmed, because the main problem is created by the environment where they live, that they have no extra stimulation, they have just the biomass cages there. But then in practice, these different species have quite different species-specific problems in the farms. I just visited 3 Finnish fur farms a little bit more than 1 week ago. As you may know, almost all Finnish fur farms are situated in the Ostrogotnik region, so very close to the Vaasa area and relatively close to Umeå also. So I was visiting there in the main area of Finnish fur farming, and I was visiting farms that farm foxes, different kind of foxes, minks, and sables and raccoon dogs. Foxes have really different problems regarding if they are Arctic foxes, like this one in the photo that I have taken, or if they are different variations of red foxes. Arctic foxes, when you meet them at the farms, they are many times really lame, they are really quiet, they just stand still or lie down, and that is partly because they have so much problems moving around, because the size of the Arctic foxes, as you probably know what kind of species Arctic foxes are when they run out in the mountainous areas, those are really different creatures that we have in fur farms. And the size of the foxes is much bigger than it used to be. Still in the old leaflets of the Finnish fur farmers, for example, they say that Arctic foxes weigh about 7 to 9 kilograms. And for example, I saw last week lots of Arctic foxes that weigh even more than 20 kilograms. So the weight has gone up more than double from the original weight of those animals. So they have problems, especially with their legs and their feet, and many of the Arctic foxes in the farms, they have kind of like bent legs that they don't, the leg isn't like this anymore, but it's like the whole part here that takes down to the ground, and it's really hard for them to move around, even though if they have a bigger cages, which is sometimes done when there are really big foxes which weigh a lot. But then the big amount of foxes in Finnish fox farms are Arctic foxes. But then there are different color variants of a traditional red fox. And those foxes are totally different in their behavior, and they have totally different problems in the farms. Red foxes, or those different colors of red foxes, they are, you could say that they are neurotic. That's the word that also the one of the farmers used when we were looking at those foxes. They are really nervous, they are really aggressive, they just jump up and down all the time. So those different kind of foxes react in a very different way to the cage environment. And then you are probably all familiar with the problems that mink have in the cages. They have also lots of stereotypical behavior. They move up and down all the time, and then they have cannibalism, they bite themselves, etc. But still, when you are talking with the fur farmers, the main welfare problem they see is the situation with the different kind of animal diseases. So they are mainly fighting still the different kind of diseases, which of course create very grave problems in the fur farms, but they don't, at least in Finland, the welfare problems that are related to the environment are not seen as key factors from the fur farmers' side. And then we have these species that you don't have here in Sweden. I'm not sure if you have ever farmed raccoon dogs or not, but raccoon dogs, many times when you see them in the farm, they don't seem like really problematic animals. They are not like jumping up and down, they are quite peaceful there. But raccoon dogs have some special features that make it very hard for them to adapt to farm life. In nature, when living normally, raccoon dogs hibernate part of the winter, so they fall into sleep, and that's something that they are not capable of doing in the fur farms. And another thing is that raccoon dog is a monogamous species, so they form lifelong partnerships. And also when they have cubs, both male and female take part in the raising the cubs and feeding the cubs. And of course in fur farms where animals are just mated with some partners that are calculated that would be like good partner for them, or this is something that they can't realize in fur farming environment. And then we have these specialty sables. Just one farm in Finland farming sables at the moment, and those sables were bought from Latvia or Lithuania after the Soviet Union collapsed, and Finnish fur farmer purchased those animals to a Finnish fur farm. And they have lots of behavioral problems also in fur farm environment. So we were even said that we can't, when we visited the fur farm, that we shouldn't go really close to the cages because they are so nervous, and they are at the moment that it's the mating season, and they want to make sure that the mating season goes well. So these were like really nervous animals, and that's one of the reasons why there is only one farm in Finland farming sables, because it's not an easy species to farm. But what happened then in Finland? I think that one interesting thing is that in general, Finland is many times following Sweden's lead in legislative manners. So many times Sweden is making some kind of new modern legislation, and after a couple of years Finland is following the same path. But even though fox farming has already ended in Sweden, and you are really critically discussing also mink farming, it seems to be really hard to gain these steps in Finland. I was just reading from the magazine on Djurensrätt that it's about 70% of the Swedish populations that's against fur farming. And in Finland we are still quite far away from those figures. In Finland it depends on the way how you ask the question, but it's about 40%, maybe sometimes 50% of the people who are against fur farming even less if you pose a question in a way where you can like select a mid-level that you say that the legislation should be better and the animals should have better welfare, but people are not really ready to ban fur farming. But still, last year, or in fact already 1 year before, in 2012, there was a new law made in Finland which made a new legal tool available for Finnish citizens. It's called Citizens' Initiative, and it's a totally new way of political acting in Finland. This means that if you gather 50,000 signatures or more for a legislative draft, the parliament has to take this matter and discuss it in the parliament. So the Finnish Animal Protection Societies decided to make a citizens' initiative with one environmental organization. So there were 4 NGOs collecting signatures for fur farming ban. And even though we in Animal Protection Societies were so early with this action that we didn't have possibility to collect those signatures via web, via internet, we had to collect them by hand in one kind of summer tour and in different kind of summer festivals and so on. These organizations could do it. I can't say that we did it because while this was done, I was living in China, so I didn't participate that actively in that process. And the NGOs gathered almost 70,000 signatures in that 6 months' time that they had. And last spring, when I came back to China, I went straight to the Finnish Parliament to the first hearing of this proposal to ban fur farming in Finland. And this was kind of like nicely written ban. It wasn't a very strict one. It had in our proposal, it was said that there would be long enough transitional period for the fur farmers to change into other professions. There was also an idea that government should be, or states should be given economic help to farmers who have to run down their business. But still, the final solution was that the Finnish Parliament last June discussed this in their session, and they voted on this. It was by margin of 146 to 36 votes, 3 blank and 14 absent, that the Finnish Parliament decided that there is no need to ban fur farming in Finland. But what was most interesting in this result was that out of 19 ministers that we have in our government, there were 7 ministers who voted for the ban. So it's much more than compared with the ordinary MPs in the Finnish Parliament. So in those influential young members of the government, there were many who were willing to support the ban. The Agricultural Committee made a committee report about this proposal and about the ban, and the committee report was against the ban, but they still raised a couple of critical questions concerning fur farming, especially these leg problems that the Arctic foxes have, other stereotypical behavior, and the lack of different kind of space and enrichment in cages. And they, in the committee report, they asked the government to give some kind of solution to these questions. And that's what's happening at the moment in Finnish discussion about fur farming. So at the moment there is a committee under the Ministry of Agriculture which is preparing new regulation for fur farming. I'm part of that committee, and we are discussing how the Finnish legislation should be changed, for example, to meet these demands that the Agricultural Committee made during this process. But to remind you what we are really talking about, I will show you one video about the Finnish fur farms. As in Sweden, also in Finland, there have been groups taking lots of photos and videos. In total, in about 80 fur farms around Finland. And this is the most recent one. It's about 7 minutes, little less.
Mä ihmettelen, että tämä homma ei ole edennyt näiden 20 vuoden aikana yhtään mihinkään. Päinvastoin tähän on mun mielestä tullut, että se mitä ennen niin ei tällaista ollut. Tämä on välinpitämättömyyttä eläimiä kohtaan ja elämää kohtaan.
Vuonna 2013 eduskunta käsittelee turkistarhauksen kieltämistä vaativaa kansalaisaloitetta. Sen on allekirjoittanut 70 000 ihmistä. Tarhaajat vakuuttavat, että eläimet voivat hyvin. On aika katsoa, ovatko eläinten olot tarhoilla parantuneet. Kuvaajat kävivät 12 turkistarhalla vuosien 2011 ja 2012 aikana. Samoilla tarhoilla käytiin useampia kertoja. Samat ongelmat toistuivat vuodesta toiseen. Tällä tarhalla vierailtiin yhteensä 3 kertaa 2 vuoden aikana. Elävien eläinten joukossa oli kuolleita, osa osin syötyjä. Minkit, jotka luontaisesti ovat yksineläjiä, olivat purreet toisensa haavoille. Ketuilla oli silmätulehduksia ja jalkavammoja. Tämä naalinpentu, jonka häntä on purtu poikki, kuvattiin tarhalla sekä syys- että marraskuussa 2012. Turkistarhaajat ovat väittäneet, että ne tarhat, joilla epäkohtia esiintyy, ovat poikkeustapauksia, alan mätiä omenia. 2 nyt kuvattujen tarhojen omistajista on kuitenkin Tarhaajien liiton hallituksen jäseniä. Tällä liiton hallituksen jäsenen omistamalla tarhalla käytiin 2. Molempina vuosina kuvaajat näkivät useita eläimiä, joilla oli pahoja käytöshäiriöitä. Tämä kettu toistaa päämäärätöntä liikettä yhä uudelleen ja uudelleen. Vaikka kuvat haavoista ja puuttuvista raajoista järkyttävät ihmisiä, pahin kärsimys johtuu kuitenkin kasvatusolojen lähes täydellisestä virikkeettömyydestä. Tämä kärsimys ei näy helposti kuvissa. Nämä käytöshäiriöt kertovat juuri tällaisesta pahoinvoinnista. Yhteensä kuvaajat ovat vierailleet yli 100 suomalaisella tarhalla, joista jokaisella eläimiä on kasvatettu vastaavanlaisissa oloissa. Kaikilla tarhoilla eläimiä kasvatetaan ahtaissa, virikkeettömissä verkkopohjahäkeissä. Usein esille tulevia ongelmia ovat silmätulehdukset, ienten liikakasvu, käytöshäiriöt, haavat ja jopa puuttuvat raajat tai hännät. Surkean elämän jälkeen ketut tapetaan suuhun ja peräaukkoon annettavilla sähköiskuilla. Nyt julkaistut kuvat osoittavat, että samat ongelmat toistuvat tarhoilla vuodesta toiseen. Näitä ongelmia ei voi korjata pelkästään valvontaa lisäämällä tai tekemällä kosmeettisia parannuksia eläinsuojeluvaatimuksiin. Luonnossa kettujen reviiri saattaa olla jopa 20 neliökilometrin laajuinen. Ne elävät maahan kaivetuissa koloissa, joita voi reviirillä olla useampiakin. Kansantarinoissa älykäs kettu on saanut viekkaan eläimen maineen. Tällaisten villien petoeläinten kasvattaminen pienissä häkeissä on mahdotonta, mikäli niiden hyvinvointi halutaan taata edes alkeellisella tasolla. Muun muassa Ruotsi, Tanska, Iso-Britannia, Sveitsi, Hollanti ja useat muut Euroopan maat ovat kieltäneet tämänkaltaisen tuotannon joko osittain tai kokonaan. Älä sulje silmiäsi. Raha ei voi olla tekosyy eläinrääkkäykselle.
Okay, that wasn't such a nice thing to watch in a way, but I hope it reminded us well of the fact that more and more this is a global thing and global campaign. You saw that also Oikeutta eläimille was using the Swedish example of banning fox farming. All those steps that have been done in different countries affect the decisions in other countries. We were especially referring to the Dutch example of total ban of farming in Finland. We haven't succeeded yet, but of course it has affected the discussion in Finland quite a lot. Because until now, Finnish fur farmers and other people speaking in favor of fur farming have normally been referring to these bans that they are only done in countries and with species that don't have lots of economical importance anymore. For example, the Swedish example of fox farming kind of ban is normally referred to in Finland like not an important one because you had such a few farms left in Sweden at that time that were farming foxes. But if we look at the main mink producers in Europe at the moment, we have this quite sad example that we have the three Nordic countries among the 5 biggest mink producers, and then we have Poland. And then we have Netherlands, which has now banned also mink farming, but they have still a transitional period going on. But this is also an example of the fact that we have quite a few countries left that are major fur farming countries and haven't really restricted fur farming in any major way. As you could see, even though the mink is the one that is still farmed in many countries where other species farming has been forbidden, also minks have lots of very serious welfare problems. And then we have the raccoon dog, the more rare species, which is some kind of specialty of Finland, and then these almost totally unrestricted fur farming countries like Poland and China. And another example of the global importance is, for us in Finland, the example of Sweden is really important for us. And then when I was living in China and discussing with the animal welfare people there, and I was asking what would be the most important thing that would help your work against the Chinese fur farming, the answer was almost every time that the most important thing is that you would get fur farming bans in Western countries, because China doesn't want to be any different and not anymore any kind of like barbaric country that doesn't have same kind of standards than other parts of the world. So the example of the Western European countries is also for the Chinese animal welfare movement the most important one. Still at the moment, Finland is the largest producer of fox pelts in the world. It's competing with China. Year to year it changes if it's China or Finland which is kind of leading the fox farming statistics. And really raccoon dogs is also a specialty of Finland and China and then Poland. But to give some positive examples too, at the moment there are about 6,000 fur farms in the EU, and almost all of them, almost 1,000 of them are in Finland. But it used to be about 6,000 fur farms in Finland alone. Of course, the amount of animals hasn't dropped as much as the amount of fur farms. The fur farms have been getting bigger all the time. But still, Finland has been farming almost double the amount of animals when I was still younger, and now it's about half of that amount anymore. When we are discussing the bans here in Nordic countries, we are often given the answer that if we would ban the fur farming here, it would move to countries where they have even more poor animal welfare legislation, namely Poland and especially China in Finnish discussion. But what we are raising more and more is the fact that in fact there is the main reason behind the growing consumption and need of fur in Asia has been promoted by the strong Nordic fur industry. Saga Furs is a fur marketing organization which is now only owned by Finnish fur farmers. It used to be a company created by different Nordic countries. It was owned by Swedish, Finnish, Norwegian and Danish fur farmers, but when the fur farming industry has had these difficulties in all these other countries, banning certain species to be farmed, little by little other countries have dropped out of Saga furs, and a couple of years ago Finnish fur farmers alone bought the whole Saga furs. And now the main asset of Saga furs is that they're trying to distinguish the European fur like an ethical, high-quality fur that's totally different from Chinese unethical fur. And in fact, they have been doing quite well in this aspect. So the Saga furs is a very well-known trademark, and they are really using this claim of ethicality when selling Saga fur. But what we know in Nordic countries is that, for example, practically all fur produced in Finnish fur farms, probably all the fur from those videos that you saw is sold and has been sold through Saga furs. So that's how ethical it is. But Salla Furs is at the same time, it's doing really strong fur promotion work in Asia, especially in China. Since 1980s, even 1970s, Finnish fur farmers have been following the markets in China, and they have been doing lots and lots of marketing in Asia to create these huge markets for fur. And Finnish fur farmers have always also been given semen of fur. They have been transporting, selling animals to Chinese fur farmers and giving advices. So in many different ways, Finnish and other Nordic strong fur industry has been promoting fur farming and fur consumption in Asia, which is now the main buyer of Nordic fur. So this is one of the reasons why I think that in fur farming industry, and when we are trying to fight the fur farming industry, it's more and more a global thing that we should be doing, because it's not just national bans are of course very important, but the whole industry works globally, and there are not that kind of like national borders that, for example, Finnish fur farming would affect Finland as a country, but in fact Finland as a really small country in global scale is a really strong player in global fur farming industry. Besides this like general promotion of Salla as an ethical trademark compared with Chinese fur industries, trying to create lots of new tools to fight these animal welfare demands. We have a certification process going on, and they are proud to say that now about 90% of the Finnish fur comes from certified farms. But at the same time, you know that, for example, if you film or take videos and photos from different Finnish fur farms, almost all of those are from certified fur farms, and these same welfare problems and diseases happen also in the certified farms, because practically all of the farms are getting to under certification. And this has also been, this is a Finnish-born process, this certification process. Now they are taking it to Norway, and it has been criticized because animal welfare-wise there isn't anything going besides over the Finnish law. There is nothing more strict that the farmers should be doing besides the Finnish law. Then there are origin assured, which is a global mark, which should show that if you know from which fur farm your fur comes from, then it should show that it's ethical and sustainable. And then they have their own Salla trademarks traceability system. And the most recent one is the welfare that the European fur farmers are developing, and mainly it's done by the Finnish animal welfare scientists, because Finland is also the country where the so-called welfare science in fur animals is mainly done. And they are trying to create same kind of tool as with other domestic animals to show if they have good or not so good welfare. But it's not totally ready yet, this system. But as you can already see from the basic environment of the fur animals, even though they would create a standard for so-called good welfare, when there are no, like, for example, diseases that you could see, no missing legs or anything like that, the welfare of animals can still be very poor. So that was my story about the situation with the fur farming at the moment in Finland, and also the connections with other countries, and especially with Sweden. I'm really happy to answer if you have some questions or you would like to comment or ask something.
I was wondering something, how common is it for Finnish people to wear fur?
It's not really that common, especially with the real long fur coats that we used to see in 1980s. But of course, the industry has been like answering also this kind of change in our preferences, and they are selling more and more of these, of course, fur trims that you see everywhere, but also these different kind of like more modern short coats. But still, it's quite rare. It's not so well seen in Finland, even though people are not against fur farming so strongly. It's something that's maybe a bit seen like a sign of bad taste sometimes. And
ethically or more deliberate?
I think it's a both, and there are all these like connections that, for example, it's in Finland it's very well known that the Russian people wear lots of fur, and sometimes people think that you appear like Russian kind of, or you have Russian style if you wear fur and so on. And then we have this difficult trend of like having more and more or better quality fake fur, which is of course a nice trend, but at the same time it kind of makes fur more fashionable, and there are more younger people wearing fur, especially when it's cheap fake fur. But still, it's 98% of the fur that goes or it's exported. There is a really small part of the Finnish fur that comes back to Finland or is made into fur garments in Finland.